Hi friends, this is session 3 SELinux Booleans. We are on the course Security Enhanced Linux Administration. So SELinux Booleans, let's talk about that. Agenda of the session is SELinux Booleans, why a service does not work, the Boolean values, service categories of SELinux Booleans, Booleans with SELinux management tool, command line versus GUI filter, Boolean settings do not stand alone because they are dependent on others, and SELinux directives for HTTP service, name service, MariaDB, NFS, Samba and SSH, just to name a few so that you get an idea. The takeaway from the session should be very simple. One line takeaway. I don't know what are Linux Boolean and how they work and how they affect my performance or the security. From this statement to I know what Linux Booleans are, SELinux Booleans are, and I know how they work, and I can find out and set SELinux Booleans as per my need for any given service, quote unquote any given service. So therefore, by the end of the session, you should be able to talk about what SELinux Booleans are. You should be able to find out right kind of SELinux Booleans for required service. You should be able to set configure it, enable or disable the booleans for your service as per your service need. That should be the takeaway from this session. So when we talk about SELinux booleans, configuring SELinux for a service means making changes to boolean settings in the virtual file system /sys. We have a lot of files here, sys fs SELinux booleans. Let's take a look at this. So here my system is, let's go to the directory /etc/sys fs SELinux, and there's a directory here booleans. Now if you look at this, there are a lot of files here. These files are basically corresponding to the booleans. So total number of booleans you can find out from here, wc-l. So we have around 317 booleans, and each one of them correspond to a given service. For example, if I want to find out the booleans for HTTPD, I can grab HTTPD. So these are HTTP booleans. Now if I can verify any boolean, I can open any file using cat command, and you will see very simple way. What you will get is you will get two values in this. These are the two values in the booleans. So one is the current value and second is the persistent value. That means the value which will be the default value when you reboot your system, because you can change the value of the current scenario, right? So you can you can change the value. We have the command to change the boolean setting. So this is the directory where all the booleans are. Every file has got only two values, either 00 or 01 or 10 or 11, depending on that settings of that. 0 means off, 1 means on. So we have on off values in this in these files, and they are not to be edited directly, but we have the commands to edit these files. So the file names are somewhat descriptive because they give you a hint about what this boolean is about, what name, because the name of the file itself is self-explanatory. Like for example, HTTP enable home directories. This name is descriptive in itself because it says that home directories of the user should be enabled for HTTP. So this boolean allows or deny access to the user home directories via Apache server. By default it is disabled, so we need to enable it. Therefore, if you configure the Apache server to serve files from user home directories, Without changes to SELinux, the Apache web server won't be able to access the files in the home directories of the user. That is the point, and that is what this setting controls, that aspect of Apache web server. So why a service does not work? This is probably the region, the region which I just explained to you. Administrators do all the work to configure a service, test out the configuration. They think they have done everything right, but yet the service does not work as they want, because it is possibly because of SELinux Boolean setting. So the solution is to make SELinux a part of what you do to configure a service. For example, HTTP, if you look at the cat command of seeing the content of the given file, as I told you, every boolean is nothing but a file name in the virtual file system. So cat sysfs SELinux Booleans httpd underscore enable home directories, and you see 00. One boolean is for current setting and other is for permanent setting, as I told you. So there are two values here. So to see the current state of the boolean, you can use get sebool. Get sebool boolean name. So get sebool httpd enable home directories. I'll show you httpd enable home directories off. To activate until the system is rebooted, you can use set sebool httpd enable home directories 1. To make changes permanent from the command line, you can use set sebool hyphen uppercase p, which make it persistent. So set sebool hyphen p httpd enable home directories 1. So we need to verify this. For a list of associated man pages, you can use man-k SELinux. So let's see get sebool and set sebool in action. And this is what I was talking about, grabbing or searching for the given SEBoolean. We can use grab command. So we'll do that also. So here we are, cat httpd ssi executable. Same way the enable home directory also you can find out here in this list, enable home directory httpd enable home dirs. Right, so get sebool. So this is right now it is off. To set the current value, you can use set sebool. So we need to set it to 1. Now if I try get sebool, now it is on. To make it permanent, I need to use hyphen uppercase p. But before that, let us see the current value of this enable home directories, what it says from that directory, because it is there in the directory. I am trying to use the cat command to see the value. Now it is 1 1. To enable it for permanent, you can use as I said right now, set sebool 1. So this will make it permanent. So set sebool, get sebool, simple command, very simple command and very simple concept. But to search for a given service, you can use grab command. Like if I want to find out all the booleans for SSH, these are the booleans which controlled SSH. If I want to see the booleans which control Samba, I can use grab Samba. If I want to control, let's say MySQL, if there is any, so these are two booleans which control MySQL. Or if we have anything related to MariaDB, let's look at that also. There's nothing for MariaDB. For named, let's see if we have some service for named. So we have two booleans for named service also. Same way for NFS server, NFS. So we have a lot of booleans for NFS service. So basically, to search for a given boolean, you can directly go to the virtual directory, the virtual file system, and list all the files in that, or you can use filter piping command and filter to search for the given boolean for a given service. That's how it works. It's quite simple. So let's continue. So there are nearly 300. To be precise, we noticed that there are 315 booleans, pseudo files in this directory. sysfs SELinux Booleans. We can use a database filter command such as grep to filter to classify those booleans. Like I demonstrated, grep httpd, grep samba, grep nfs. If you want description of a given boolean, you can use SEmanage with -l. SEmanage with -l will give you description of the boolean. So to understand, to check a given boolean, we can use SEmanage the boolean name -l, of course. You can start SELinux management. This is GUI tool actually. This is a good tool. System config SELinux. Let's take a look at system config SELinux. If it is installed, if the package is installed, you will see the GUI part also. Let's take a look at. So system config SELinux not installed. Not installed, no problem. Let's try yum install system config SELinux. Okay, so that means we need to verify which command, which package provide this command. So definitely if the package is not installed, let's see if we have some SELinux related SELinux. If I'm missing something, let me start with SELinux. I think there are some utility packages missing if I'm not wrong, because there's GUI utility package is there for SELinux, and that must be installed before we try with this boolean. So GUI util SELinux core utils SELinux SE something. I'm not for remembering the name of the package, but there's some package which is missing, I'm sure. Okay, I'll find out the package name and I'll show you, no problem. So because I don't want to waste time in searching for the package name which provide this command. Alright, so to compare the list, by the way, let's take a look at the screenshot from that. Once you start as system config SELinux, you will see the list here in the GUI booleans, and you will see all the booleans here with the proper description also. So boolean name, description, and the module for which it is, and you just enable and disable it. Simply click on this checkbox, that's it. Compare the list of GUI in the output of output of the command. So ls with the this virtual file system, the file name, grep http, the filter in SELinux management tool filters by SELinux boolean names and descriptions. In some cases, a boolean is associated with the requirement of SELinux file. For example, httpd underscore anonymous underscore write. This works only if the associated files and directories are labeled with public content read write t. So which means that both booleans must be enabled in order to allow anonymous write. The anonymous write will not work if you have not set that boolean public content read write type. So therefore we need to set both of them. So to set the type on where www HTML files and subdirectories, we discussed yesterday in the previous class how to change the context. So chcon command is used. Chcon -r -t public content read write and the directory name. We know it, we discussed in detail yesterday. So Boolean settings do not stand alone. SELinux settings do not stand alone. For example, if you enable httpd enable home directory, you still need to configure httpd conf.d user directory.conf because that is Apache setting. They are independent of each other and you need to look at both of them independently and verify that you have configured everything correct and you have enabled the proper boolean correctly. So therefore Apache settings are not sufficient for the booleans for the Apache server to serve files from the home directory. And same way http enable home directory is not sufficient to serve the files from the home directory. You still have to configure the other part, whether it is Apache configuration or whether it is home directory enable boolean. Okay, these are some of the booleans, not all because there are so many booleans of Apache, but some of the booleans are discussed here just for a reference, a quick reference I would say. httpd anonymous write, allow to write to files labeled with public content read write t. httpd can check spam, support the use of spam assassin for web-based email apps. httpd can send mail, allow Apache to send mails. httpd enable CGI, allow running of CGI scripts enabled by default, but it requires the script to be labeled with httpd sys script execute t. Enable FTP server, as usual FTP server will be allowed. Enable home directories, we already discussed in detail. Read user content, allow Apache to read all files in the user home directories. Use GPG, allow Apache to use GPG for encryption. These are some of the services just to give an idea that we have so many services which control Apache behavior. So therefore we can find out now definitely, given that yes we know there are so many booleans, we can filter, we can verify, and by looking at the files we'll find out the right kind of boolean which we require for our service. So whenever Apache is one of the given service of Apache is not working as you expect that to work, you take a look at the corresponding boolean for that purpose. There might be a boolean which is not allowing that to happen. SELinux directory for name service, the name service daemon named is based on Berkeley Internet Name Domain bind software, which is default RHEL7 DNS service. If you maintain an authoritative DNS zone, activate the named write master zone boolean. If this boolean is not enabled, you will not be able to control. Then local DNS software can overwrite master zone files. So this boolean is required for named service. Same way for MariaDB. If you notice, there were two booleans. One was connect any, one was SELinux MySQL connect enabled. The connect any boolean allow MariaDB MySQL to connect to all ports disabled by default. And that is probably the reason if you configure this Linux, if you configure MySQL and it's not working, it is not allowed on a given port, definitely that means this boolean might be off. MySQL connect any, and this is basically a requirement. One of my students faced a problem recently when I was delivering MySQL DB training, that the requirement of the lab assignment was configure SELinux, configure MySQL on multiple ports or run multiple instances of MySQL. So this boolean must be enabled to run as multiple instances of MySQL, because you have to have one port for each MySQL installation. So that will allow MySQL connect, and it will allow MariaDB to connect to all ports. By default it is disabled. SELinux MySQL connect enabled, allow SELinux to users to connect to a local MariaDB server using Unix domain socket. By default it is disabled. So we need to verify this settings if MySQL is not working properly. Same way for NFS server. Export all read write, export all read only, NFS home directories, virtual use NFS. So these are some of the NFS service booleans and with the corresponding meaning. I'm sure it is not difficult to understand by the name itself, if you know what is NFS server and how it works. So this is the directory for NFS server. Then we have directives for Samba. Samba is a server which connect Linux with Windows. When you are working with Windows and you want to access Linux files from home directories or from others, so we need a server, dedicated server, which manage this kind of share. And any directory or file or printer or device from Linux to be available on Windows is referred as share. So how these shared are allowed through SELinux, how they are controlled through SELinux is controlled by these booleans, and there are so many more. So Samba create home directory boolean. Samba create home directories. Allow Samba to create new home directories via pam mk home directory.so. Samba enable home directories. Support sharing of user home directories. Samba export all read only. Allow files and directory to be shared only read only mode. Run unconfined. Allow Samba to run unconfined script in where lib Samba scripts. Samba share NFS. Support sharing of file system mounted under NFS. Anonymous write. Allow Samba to modify files on public directories configured with public content read write T and public content read only T. Use Samba home directories. Objective is not to make you memorize or cram these booleans at this point. Definitely not. But objective is, as I said, one liner, that you should be able to diagnose the problem related to SELinux boolean if your service is configured properly and not running as expected. So how to identify, how to find out the corresponding boolean and how to set that boolean for your service. Same way SSH. SSH chroot read write home directories. Allow chroot enabled SSH service to read and write files from user home directories. Allow SSH keys sign. SSH sysadmin login. Key generation, key sign. Allow host based authentication would not require username and public private passphrase key based. So we need to allow that. If everything is set and still you are not able to work, that means this boolean is not set properly. You need to enable it. SSH sysadm login. Support access by users configured with sysadmin _ r role. This does not include the root administrative user. In general, it's more secure to log in as a regular user connecting with passphrase. So what I have discussed so far in this session is very clear, and I stick to my one line expectation that what booleans are, how to set them, how to enable, how to disable, how to display, and if a service is not working, how to search for a given boolean if the service is not behaving the way you are expecting it to behave. Alright, so that's all for this session. Thank you.